Hey guys, Steve and Terry here at Terra Bella Farm. I'd like to thank the Two Family Homestead for inviting us to do their Homestyle dinner challenge collaboration. What are you laughing about? Anyhow, Terry and we've thought about this for a while, and there's so many directions you can go with this project. And I really think that most people have a similar idea what homestyle dinner is. I'm sure chicken, pork, beef, all those things are going to be right at the top of the list. But we chose to do a meal that we really enjoy. Everybody we've ever served it to really enjoys it, and I know it's different. It's probably not a meal that we're going to find in this collaboration. So anyhow, Terry's going to tell us a little bit about what it is, and then we'll go right into showing you how to prepare this meal. But one thing I would like to say too, I think homestyle dinner is, in our mind, is a dinner that would obviously be made at home but be served either at the dining room table or off at the kitchen counter, island, what have you, and everybody kind of follows through and serves herself. But that's how we look at it. So she's going to tell you a little bit about what it is she's going to be making, and hope you guys enjoy it and come along. So Terry?
Hi. I am making, it's called Haluska. In this dish we have bacon, we have onions. What are you doing? We have bacon, onions, noodles, cabbage, and pierogies. And so let's get started. The first step that we're going to do is I make homemade noodles for the Haluska. So I use farm fresh eggs from our chickens, and I use 4 of them. A little pail when I put the stuff in. And you beat the eggs. This is the recipe that both my grandmas used to use. So this is some people only use egg yolks, some people use egg whites, but I use both. The next thing is a pinch of salt. And I use the red sea salt. And then you start adding your flour. And I use all-purpose flour. Now, I don't ever measure it. I never count it. Usually I use my hands when I do this, so I'll have to fill you guys in on how many cups it actually uses. Okay, here we have the dough. I've used about 2.5 cups of flour. As you can see, it's still a little soft, so I'm going to add a little bit more. And you just work that in to your dough until your dough is kind of stiff. It's a little stiffer than what bread dough is. And see that the texture is a little different. It's hard to explain it. You almost have to feel it, but it's stiffer than what bread dough is. So the next thing I do is I divide it in half, work the dough a little bit, set my bowl aside, and I use a pastry cloth. I've been using a pastry cloth now for a couple years anyway. Saves on the mess, and it makes it a whole lot easier rolling out than on a counter or even on wax paper, because it stays still. It doesn't move all around like how the wax paper and stuff does. You always want to make sure you're floured. Your noodle dough is floured really well. I just kind of work it around a little bit. Just start rolling it out. You want to apply a good amount of pressure to this because of the elasticity and stuff that's in it from the gluten. Just makes it a little easier to roll it out, applying the pressure to it. And you can make this as thin or as thick as you like, depending on the thickness of the noodles once you cook them. They usually poof up a little bit, so I try to roll it out pretty thin. I usually try to do it kind of like in a rectangle. And I'll show you the way that both of my grandmas used to cut their noodles. And then I have a cheater method too that I use. Kind of gives you a little more consistency in the size of the noodle. Okay, you do this and then you just roll it up. You just have to make sure you got a lot of flour on it, because that keeps it from sticking. You try to roll it evenly. And my grandma's always used a knife. And the rule of thumb is what they did is they took about half of their thumbnail is about how big that they cut it. So that's kind of like my gauge into how big I cut my noodles. And then this is what you end up with. This is the size. Okay, so here's my hand cut noodles of what I did. And as you can see, they're not all exactly perfect sizes, but they're close, and it doesn't really matter because they taste good. So I went ahead and I rolled this out here. I'm going to roll it out a little bit more, and I'm going to show you a little gadget that I found. And they actually have these now. I found them. I've actually bought them for my daughters, and how you can cut noodles a different way. So I cut these with this old onion chopper that I found years ago. It's just this little thing here. It was one of those little, as seen on TV gadgets, and you'd chop your onions like this. Well, it makes a nice noodle cutter. And I usually always cut it into thirds because your noodles are really long otherwise. And so this here makes your noodles pretty much almost perfect. You know, your end pieces might be a little different and stuff, but it makes it a nice size, and it's very, very easy to do. Even kids can do it. And the next thing we're going to do is we'll cook the noodles to be able to use those in the haluska. But you just want to make sure you flour them, keep them from sticking. And I'll go ahead and cut these, and then we'll get over to the stove and get started on cooking these. Hi guys, I'm back. I wanted to kind of show you, right now I'm letting the water start to boil so that I can do the noodles. I wanted to show you, here's onions from our garden. I rinsed them off and stuff, and then I have this here. I might need more, but I just wanted to leave those like that. And then I have the cabbage that I'll chop up, and the bacon, I'm getting ready to chop it up and start frying it while I'm cooking the noodles, but I just kind of wanted to give you guys an idea. This is a pound of bacon. I don't know if it says 3-pound head of cabbage. I just grab cabbage, it doesn't matter, and you add to it however much you want. Onions, I usually use a whole onion, but since I have green onions out of my garden, I'm just going to use like a handful of them, and I'll use the tops and everything in it. And I like a lot of onions, so I may end up using all of this. I don't know, I'll see once I get it in the pan, and I'll show you guys then. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on cutting this stuff up, and we'll be back in a little bit. Okay, we're going to go ahead and cook the noodles. As you can see, the water's boiling, and there's some noodles in there, and you just start adding your noodles, and what they'll do is they'll start floating when they're done. You usually just cook them all together. At the same time, you just put a few in at a time so that they don't get all stuck together. Using the 4 eggs and the flour, this usually makes 4 to 6 servings, depending upon who's eating. My grandsons are here, and my son-in-laws, and my husband, and my stepson are here. I usually use a dozen eggs because they all love the noodles. So, and you can use this for homemade chicken noodle soup. You can just use this for like beef and noodles if you want to, for like a soup. Just really any kind of thing. You know, I like making these and just having buttered noodles with some parsley and garlic. So there's a variety of ways that you can use it, just like store-bought noodles, but they're better. That's my opinion anyway. So anyway, so we'll just go ahead and cook these and get those done, and then I'll strain those, and we'll get started cooking the bacon. I've got the garlic minced up, and the onions are chopped, and we'll just get ready to start doing that. As you can see, they're starting to turn real yellow. That's from the egg yolk and stuff from the farm fresh eggs. And as you can see, they're floating. And you can see right here, this is one of the noodles, the last noodles that I put in. It's a little different color. It's not quite as light. They lighten up a little bit as they cook. Doesn't take long for them to cook. You know, so it's all dependent upon what you like as far as the tenderness or the chewiness and stuff of it. I usually let them cook for a couple minutes in the water once they've raised up to the top. Okay, and then here's my bacon. I'm going to go ahead and get my pan going. Get the bacon put in here. This is bacon from one of the hogs that we raised. We always raise our own pork and our own chicken. So we'll fry this till it's crisp, and right at the end, before it just gets right to that point of crispness, I add the onions and the garlic to it. And in the meantime, while that's cooking and stuff, I'm going to go ahead and strain the noodles. As you can see, the water's starting to boil, so we'll turn that off. Strain them. I like to run a little bit of cool water on them since we're going to be using this in bacon and grease and stuff here in a little bit. If you don't do that, they end up sticking because of the gluten and stuff that's in it. It just causes them to stick together. This here just kind of helps them to keep from doing that. let it sit till we're ready to put it into the last and final part of making the haluska. I have the bacon frying up here. It's getting brown. And I've got the chopped onions from our garden, and I have 3 cloves of garlic in here as well. So I just add that to it. And I usually add the garlic on top of the onions. It just makes it easier to put everything in together. And I usually don't salt anything until at the end. Salting it can make your meat tough, and it's just a trick that I learned. And so, you see all the pretty colors. I've got some purple onions in here that we're growing, and I like using the tops too. It adds good flavor to it. We'll let this simmer a little bit. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add our cabbage. As you can see, I have a whole head of cabbage here that I chopped up, and it doesn't have to, if you like big chunks, you can use big chunks, or you can use little chunks. It's totally up to your preference as to what it is that you like. You see how green these are getting now? So when they get about that color, or when your onions are translucent, but since I'm using these, I usually wait till they get about this color of green, and then I add in my cabbage. This meal, like I said, it'll serve 4 people easily, and 6 people a lot. Again, depends on what kind of a family you have and how much they eat. And you can increase this or decrease this however you want. You know, if you want to do a ½ pound of bacon and use 2 eggs and a ½ head of cabbage to do it just for a small meal, you can do that. The pierogies that we're going to use, I use Mrs. T's, and I also make homemade pierogies. But since I'm short on time today, we're just going to do the Mrs. T's pierogies. We'll add those in here in a little bit. I let the cabbage cook down a little bit before I add them in. I have my heat turned down on low. I'll put the lid on it for a few minutes and just kind of let it simmer before I turn it any. I usually turn it a couple times before I add the pierogies in. As you can see, it's cooking down pretty well, and I'm getting ready to add the pierogies to it. Just turn it around here a little bit more, and then I'll show you how I do the pierogies. Okay, I kind of like to move some of the stuff away from the edge there, and then I just start adding my pierogies into it. Kind of bury them. And kind of like having the bottom side down to start out with. It's just my preference. You could do it however you want. And I kind of just let this steam like this for, probably a good 5 or 6 minutes till these are thawed out. And then I add the noodles to it on top. Just kind of cover them up a little bit. Okay, then we put the lid back on for about another 5 or 6 minutes. Okay, we're getting ready to stir the pierogies here, and as you can see, they're not frozen now. We just kind of flip them over gently. Try not to break them. Sometimes you still do, even when you're being gentle. See, the cabbage is all cooking down. All the flavors are going through it. Once we get this all turned over, we're going to top it with the noodles. Let them heat back up, and then we'll stir everything through it. We'll add some salt and pepper once we put the noodles on the top here. Now to add the noodles. These noodles too, when you make them, you can dry them out and then freeze them if you want. Or you can go ahead and boil them. You're making chicken noodle soup. I just stick it right in the broth. I don't pre-cook them and then put them in. But you can do it however you want. They freeze really well. We do Thanksgiving dinner at the church. I made noodles and dried them out, and then the day of, I made them a few days ahead. The day of Thanksgiving, I went ahead and, well, when we had our Thanksgiving dinner, I went ahead and cooked them that day in the broth. I had turkey broth. So, right now we'll go ahead and we'll put your pepper on. I like using ground pepper, but you can use whatever you like. I have my red sea salt here. You can see it has minerals and stuff in it, and I actually found out about this through Doug and Stacy. I like watching them on Off Grid. We're Homestead homies. And so I use that with salt and pepper. And I put the lid on it for about 2 minutes, and then I'll stir it again, and then we'll work it through again, probably one more time, and then we'll be ready to eat our home style of cooking. We'll see you then. Okay, I'm going to stir the noodles in, and then we will be ready to eat our home style meal. This here is our version of Haluska. I know there's many versions out there. I've seen Haluska that just had bacon and noodles and onions. I've seen some that just had the pierogies and cabbage and bacon. So this is our version here at Terra Bella Farm. And as my father-in-law used to say, I love everything in this bowl. First time I ever made it for him. So we will show you what it looks like here shortly on a plate. Okay, so here we are with our meal, our Homestyle meal, Haluska. And I'm going to put it on the plate here. Smells good. See how the pierogies are? They're nice and soft, and they've got all that yummy goodness about it. The cabbage is cooked down, the onions are cooked down. Wish you were here to eat some with us.
Hey guys, yeah, Terry's got this meal finished. It looks great, and I want to thank her. It's been a real pleasure to watch her put this together, and I know it's going to be equally as delicious. I've eaten this meal many times, and I really like it a lot. So anyhow, I'm going to you, hon, thank you. And to YouTube, thank you for watching our videos, and subscribe. Leave comments, and if you have any information about this recipe, feel free.
Any questions
about this recipe? Sorry. Feel free to leave a comment,
Yes.
or just contact Terry, and she'll answer those questions. But anyhow, hopefully this answered the question of what we think home-style dinner is. And so anyway. Well, let's give it a taste, hon.
Okay.
I know, I like the pierogies a lot. That's my favorite. So good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. God bless.